evening, everybody, and thank you for choosing King Jordan Radio for March the 1st, 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special guest. She wrote the book about Michael Jackson. Her name is Aphrodite Jones, and let's bring her into the conversation. Aphrodite Jones, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Jordan. I'm well. How are you doing?
Okay. For the last time we spoke, we've got a lot more publicity. So what I'd like you to do is tell our listeners a little bit about your background, you know, the cases you covered, Peterson, before we get to Michael.
Sure. Well, I have been covering high-profile crime cases for 25 years. So I was at the OJ trial. I was at the Michael Jackson trial. I was at the Scott Peterson trial. I was at the Phil Spector trial. I was at the Robert Blake trial. Recently, I was at the Casey Anthony trial. I was at the Jerry Sandusky trial. I'm planning to go to the Trayvon Martin trial and the Pistoria trial. So not something that I do, and I do it as an author and write books about these things, but also do it as a television host for Investigation Discovery Channel, where I host a show that is called True Crime with Aphrodite Jones, and I also produce that show. So that's
Monday night at 10 o'clock
Monday night
on the
at 10
ID
p.m.
network.
On ID, yep.
And I heard that from a little birdie that they have renewed you for another 14 weeks?
And for another 13 episodes, yes. How did you hear that? The all-knowing King Jordan. Yes, it's been renewed. I'm going into number 4. And so this has been on the air now for 4 years, over a span of 4 years. And the season 3 is just about coming to an end. There's 2 more episodes left. And then we'll start filming. We're already in pre-production for season 4, which will be 13 episodes. And so they've expanded the amount of episodes that the show will have, which is great.
Now, when you did the episode with O.J. and you were close to Mr. Goldman, and he was talking and he kept saying, I want them to know I have, his name, meaning Ron Goldman. Did you feel very emotional? Because I know I did.
Yes. I mean, there are times when I am overcome with the emotion that the victim's family, when they open up to me. And in the case with Ron Goldman, everybody was so caught up in O.J. Simpson and O.J. and O. Brown. And he, Mr. Goldman, Fred Goldman said to me, he realized that, people didn't even care about who the other victim was. And,
right.
He finally had to say, his wife forced him to call the radio station that was reporting the news and said, my son has a name. His name is Ron. And when he told me that, he just broke down in tears. I mean, to think that you could have someone killed and have so much media attention on it and have nobody even care about the name of your son, your loved one, at all, because the suspect is famous, and therefore your family member who was murdered in cold blood doesn't even count.
Right. No, that was very telling. I saw him with a lot of emotions in your episode, and definitely that was well done. So you have 2 more new episodes to air this Monday and the week after?
Correct. And the one coming up...
And then do you replay them until next season?
I think they will go into reruns. I know they're going into reruns. I don't know how long the reruns will air, but they definitely will be rerunning for some period of time in the next few months.
Also, have you been following the Jodi Arias case?
Yes, I have. I've been very involved with it, actually, watching the testimony and following the trial all throughout, and especially now with her on the witness stand. And it is a mind-boggling murder trial, to say the least.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think this is like one of those, she was obsessed with him, because she doesn't seem like that she has a past of killing people. I think she was so jealous of what the victim was doing, maybe with another girl. And I'm talking about Alexander and Travis Alexander, and I think she was so obsessed with him that she did what she did. What do you think?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I agree with you on that, Jordan. He was also played a part in this because he was somebody who enjoyed kind of teasing women and stringing them along and being the, Casanova, if you will. And that was a big mistake on his part because he knew that she didn't have a full deck because she was kind of stalking him and was talking to other people about having kids with him, and even that he made it clear to her that they were still going to remain friends but not get married. They shouldn't have ever had sex when she came to see him. I mean, she was able to get him in a vulnerable place, which wouldn't have happened had he not decided, well, since she's here, I'll take another spin at her, if you will. I just hate to say it that way, but he does come off a little bit unsympathetic.
What is your take on the prosecutor in the middle of why she's really losing it, crying, and him right in her face saying, were you crying when you stabbed Travis? Something out of like a movie. It was really, really intense. What was your feeling on Juan Martinez?
There's a lot of people who have attacked Juan Martinez for being too aggressive and assertive, and I disagree with that. I think that Juan Martinez is doing exactly what should be done with this woman because she is an actress and a sociopath, and I like to call her Jodiopath. Yeah, she is really one of a kind. There's nobody that comes close, and she will utilize any platform and every emotion she can pull out that she can turn on and off like a water faucet. And he's not letting her get away with it. And he has to get in her face about it. Maybe he doesn't have to be quite as blunt and aggressive as he is, but that's his personal style. And I'm certainly not going to criticize him for his personal style because this woman is a cold-blooded killer, and she wants mercy and sympathy and trying to tug at the heartstrings of a jury. I don't think so. I would be in her face, too.
What is your take on the death penalty? Do you like it, A, and B, do you think she's going to get it?
Okay. Well, it's a touchy subject. I personally, this is how I've always thought about the death penalty. I like the death penalty in theory. In other words, that somebody could think that there could be put to death and that there's an eye for an eye. And that they have to sit in prison awaiting this dreaded moment when they will be put to death, which is really hell and torture. Right. But what I don't like is actually putting the person to death. Right. So to me, I used to like the way the system was where they would get the death penalty, but then they'd sit there in California for 35 years and they wound up dying before they were put to death. That's the way I would prefer it to work rather than in Texas or Florida where, or with Timothy McVeigh where they get the death sentence and then the day comes when they actually get put to death. I just don't know that I feel like agreeing with playing God. So I'm very conflicted about it, but on the other hand, I think it's a tremendous deterrent for some criminals who think to themselves, geez, if I take this life, I may have to sacrifice my life. And they're too selfish to want to do that. And I think it is a deterrent. And it's also a good plea bargaining chip because if someone's facing the death penalty, they're willing to take life in prison without parole. Whereas if you don't have the death penalty to face, then you're going down from there. So it's complex. I don't know that there's a simple answer to it.
Right, and some might argue that in certain jails, the way the person is, that jail is actually worse than being alive. You know, in certain jails, that is. You know,
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. I've been in supermax prisons, and trust me,
that's right.
I've seen how they are put in cages like animals, where they don't even have, the prisoners don't even have a window at all of any kind, or even in the 1 hour a day that they get, quote-unquote, free, which is not free. They're led to the end of the pod, and they're in another box that has a filmy cover over the ceiling area, so all you can't see the sky. You just see a different shade of light rather than the inside of your cell. And the cells don't have bars on them. They have like a mesh on them, a wire mesh, because of the way the prisoners acted over the years, where they would actually fling feces at the correction officers. And because of so much of that went on, they behaved like animals, so they became treated like animals. And I've been there. I've seen it for myself, so I know that there's a worse hell here on earth than whatever might be waiting on the other side after death. So, that's a whole nother factor in all of this. I mean, it's
absolutely. And one last thing, I read that you went to New York to do the candlelight visualing with the Trayvon Martin family.
Yes, I did.
What's your feelings on that case?
I have to say that, first of all, I went to the vigil because I wanted to be there to mark that 1 year moment that Trayvon Martin had been killed. And
right.
I was shocked to even realize it had been a year, frankly. I didn't even realize the time went that fast. And when I found out about it,
that's not right.
You know what? I'm in New York. I travel so much, I didn't think I would be here, but I am here, and I was surprised they were doing it in New York because I thought they would have done it in Florida. So I thought, you know what? I'm meant to be there because I'm here and I'm able to go. So I went, and one of my assistants went with me, and we actually did some interviews right there in the just before the vigil began. And I didn't realize that Trayvon's parents were going to actually be there. I was told that, but I thought it was a rumor that they were there, and I was standing very close to them. And then Jamie Foxx appeared, suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, and they made a path in the crowd for him to be able to enter, and he spoke as well as Trayvon's parents. And the whole thing was very heartfelt, very touching, nonviolent, peaceful. We said a prayer for a minute of silence. We lit candles and blew them out after that 1 minute of silence. And it was very gut-wrenching for me to hear those parents talk about wanting justice for their son, and to know that had they not hired an attorney who went after the phone records to discover that Trayvon was on the phone at the time that he was killed, that that was not being released by the Sanford Police Department, and that they had concluded their criminal investigation with the Stand Your Ground law and had let Zimmerman slide for all those weeks. And so they had to take an active participation in the criminal investigation into Zimmerman. And, the strength that they were able to show the other night, and the fact that Jamie Foxx was there, I've got a lot of backlash on my Facebook pages about how he just wants to make a movie about this, and who are Hollywood celebrities to be experts on crime, and all kinds of stuff. And to that I say, number one, Jamie Foxx won an Oscar for playing Ray Charles, and he does not need to go to Union Square on a rainy Tuesday night in the horrible weather in the cold of New York on a really rainy, awful night and stand in the middle of a couple hundred people in a vigil, okay? He does not need to do that in order to be in a movie about Trayvon Martin. So that's just so cynical. And he was there from the heart. He spoke from the heart. One of the things that he mentioned was that he did not want this to be an issue about race, that he wanted it to be an issue about thinking about a 17-year-old boy whose life was snuffed out, who will never get to skateboard, will never get to ski, who will never get to go to college, who will never get to have a family of his own, and what a tragedy that is. I mean, clearly most of the people who were there, who I interviewed, said, absolutely, this is about race. But I found it interesting that Jamie Foxx did not come there in order to be a rebel-rouser, but just truly to just say that prayer and shed light on this issue of the justice that they want for Trayvon to the world. And I have had a lot of backlash from it. There are many people out there who feel that George Zimmerman is being wrongfully accused and railroaded by the media, and that, to that I say, okay, let's wait until the trial actually happens and we see what all the facts truly are.
Yeah, I had Richard Herman here a couple weeks ago, and he said he thinks there's going to be acquittal, and he thinks that there might be riots, in essence, if there is an acquittal.
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that there will be some serious public backlash if there's an acquittal. However, I also am not so sure that I would go so far as to say that to guess as to what a jury will do once the facts are truly known.
One thing we learned is we can never guess a jury verdict. Case Anthony and
exactly.
Okay, so I wanted to bring you back to 2005. You're working for Fox then, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Fox
so you're part of the media that is out to get Michael Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yes, I was.
So take me to the part where you said to yourself that you want to make this right, that you want to look at this over. What made you decide that, you know what, this is what I want to do. This I feel strongly about this, and I don't care what my confidants say. This is what I'm going to do. Where were you, like, in terms of, like, did a thought just come to your head? Did you see something on TV that maybe something triggered you? Because when we spoke before, you said this happened after the trial. You started researching.
Yes. What triggered me was that the day of the verdict, when I was asked by Bill O'Reilly, what do you think of this verdict? Did the jury get it right? And in that moment where I had to answer him live via satellite from Santa Maria, I realized that I had to say, yes, I guess they got it right. And then I started to ponder, if they got it right, then what have I been talking about all these months about Jackson being, salacious with children and all the things that I've been reporting. And so initially what I did was I went over to Neverland and followed all the fans over there. And because I was media, I was able to pass through the miles of fans on the street in Los Olivos leading up to Neverland. When I got to the gates of Neverland, there were all these media trucks interviewing fans, and fans were weeping and crying because he'd been, acquitted. And I started to kind of think about how much his fans truly love him and why they flew from all over the world for all those months to be with him, and how adamant they were about him not being a pedophile, about there being nothing wrong about him being with children, and that in other countries around the world, there's not all of that much emphasis. If somebody spends time with children or sleeps in a bed with children, it's not considered pedophilia in other countries. And that's another thing that people hammered at with me, especially Europeans, during the aftermath of the verdict. And I listened and I listened, and I kind of thought, well, yes and no, I don't know. And it took me about 6 months, really, of doing my own soul searching and realizing that I need to go back to Santa Maria and request to see all of the evidence. And if I can get that judge to allow me to see it, then I'm going to sit and look at this for myself alone without the noise of all the media around me.
Right.
And that's what I did. I went to Santa Maria. I requested to see the evidence before I got there, and I got a court order allowing me to go through the evidence. And when I got there, they had ready for me, and they had, boxes and boxes of photos and transcripts and tapes, and I was guarded. There were things I could photocopy, there were things I could make pictures of pictures, and then there were things that I had to watch and sit in person and watch in the basement of that courthouse. And I did all of that. And the more I played the tape of the accuser, Gavin Arvizo, in his police interview with the Santa Barbara sheriffs, the more I kept replaying it. And ultimately, I turned to the court clerk who was, monitoring me, and I said, I've never had children, but I'm watching this kid say that he doesn't know what masturbation is to the officers, and he's 13 at the time that he was doing this interview about allegedly being molested. And I turned to her and I said, is that right? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. And she said, no, that's not right.
No, that isn't. I could tell you firsthand.
Yeah. So she had a son. I said, you have boys? And she said, yes. And I said, so, because to me, a thing like that that's so kind of obvious, it's like, so blunt, and it's just a bald-faced lie. Why would he lie about that? What would be the purpose of saying, I don't even know what it is, masturbation? It just didn't ring true. And so then I started to really look at the whole interview again to see what was ringing true in what he was telling the police. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized they were leading him down the path of Michael being, having approached him and having touched him. He was not leading them. And unlike children who have to be drawn out that are truly victims of sexual molestation, this kid was, he was being drawn out to some degree, but he couldn't remember, and his demeanor during the interview wasn't believable. And later not long after, I contacted the jury foreman from the Michael Jackson trial, Paul Rodriguez.
Yes.
And Rodriguez told me that the biggest thing and reason that the jury came up with acquittal and not guilty was they looked at that same tape of Gavin Arvizo, the accuser, and they looked at it like 5 or 6 times, he said. And he asked, why were we looking at it that many times? And because he said they were looking for the kid's demeanor. Was he telling the truth? Was he nervous? Was he anxious? And they all came to the same conclusion, that this kid was lying. He really was lying. And that's the conclusion I came to. And once I saw that, it fit with the question of the timeline. Because remember, when he did the Bashir interview, when Bashir did that interview with Michael and Gavin Arvizo and the other kids from the Arvizo family, Gavin had not seen Michael Jackson for a couple of years. Michael had helped this kid with cancer, had helped him heal, given him encouragement and done blood drives for him and his family and everything else. And then he was done with that. He had moved on to his next gone to Japan or wherever he was doing, okay? And when Bashir came and approached him about a documentary that was going to help him, basically repair his image or improve his image and show how he's helped children all over the world and children's hospitals and how he wants to have a national and international children's holiday and talk about the importance of children. That was the reason for the documentary. And so as a part of that, Bashir suggested, why don't we bring some of the kids that you've helped back to Neverland so that people can see what you've done to help heal sick children. And they were going to, he also suggested bringing this kid whose name is David. I only know him as the one name David. His is a kid whose father poured gasoline all over him and burned him alive, but he actually survived back in the 1980s. Yes. And I met David on the Phil Donahue show. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And, I mean, it was, what do you say to a child like that has turned into looking like an E.T. because his father didn't want him alive and burned him alive and he lived to tell. But Michael had actually brought David to Neverland as well to try to help David. And for some reason or another, they decided not to go with David, and they decided instead to go with Gavin Ravizzo, who had the cancer and now was better.
Right.
And, I mean, Michael later confided in his people that when he sat on the bed with Gavin talking about helping Gavin, it was allegedly Bashir's idea that they hold hands. And then Janet Arvizo actually confirmed that in the video that she did, where she said, let's hold hands the way Bashir told you to hold hands.
Right, the rebuttal video.
The rebuttal video, exactly. And so it's a confirmation of what Michael was saying to other people, which is, I wasn't really this close to this kid anymore, and here Bashir is asking me to hold his hand, and now, of course, he's got the cameras rolling, and now he's asking questions about whether they sleep in the same bed together, and even though Michael slept on the floor and let the kids sleep on his bed because they wanted to be in his room where he spends most of his time, he still made the remark, well, there's nothing wrong with sleeping in the same bed together, we have milk and cookies, whatever.
And they twisted that.
And Bashir twisted that into a total sexual, devious, sinister situation that then later, after the documentary aired, is when the Arvizo family actually made the allegations that there was anything sexual that had gone on. So, in other words, up until this time,
that would be the last time something would occur, I would think.
Exactly.
In a normal situation.
Why in the world would Michael Jackson, the most famous person on earth, after this documentary that he trusted, Martin Bashir, now airs in England and then later in the United States, and all over the news is this supposed Michael Jackson, allegation that he's molested this cancer-ridden child who has stage 4 cancer. Why would he do that after the documentary airs? Because that's when the allegations were made.
And it seems like that Bashir was leading Michael Jackson. Like, don't you think it's something wrong with a 44-year-old man sharing the bed? And then Michael said, when you say bed, you say you're thinking sexual. So it was almost like Martin in the regular one, not the outtake one, was saying such stuff to make MJ look horrible. Like, I knew I had to confront him about this sleeping with kids and, plastic surgery, and, it was just so, and I think he got reprimanded for wrong journalism in England, I was told.
Well, but you're mixing two different things. First of all, he definitely was leading Michael down the path of let me make you look guilty. There's no doubt about it. And he yet posed as let me make you look wonderful. And Michael gave him carte blanche and let Bashir follow Michael around for 6 months to Berlin, to everywhere, anywhere, Vegas, this, that, Miami, Neverland, this and that, carte blanche. And Michael did it for free and with nobody seeing a contract. Okay? He just did it because he had this trust in Martin Bashir, because Martin Bashir had done a documentary about Princess Diana, and Michael just went with the goodness and naivete. Thank God he had his own cameraman there to do take footage of all the footage, of the interviews, because at least he had some proof of context once the thing got edited in such a way to make Michael look so badly, that he was able to show some of the context as to how it got distorted. But other than having his own videographer there, Michael had no protection from this man. He had no protection, he was doing for no pay, okay, and gave this man complete carte blanche, believing hook, line, and sinker that this man from England was coming to basically show the world that Michael was never appreciated for all the help he had given to children his whole life, that no one really had paid attention to. Instead, the guy starts turning the tables on Michael, and Michael was so naive, even then, he didn't see it. He didn't realize that this was going to happen to him until it actually aired.
I think Mike was very vulnerable to this whole situation.
Yeah. Michael was very vulnerable, was always very vulnerable in his life. That's why we call him, a Peter Pan, because he always, even though he was a genius and a musical genius and also a business genius, buying the Sony catalog and whatnot, he still had the soul and heart of a child, and he never grew up from that because he never had a childhood. And he talked about it in the Bashir outtakes, how, nature made him compensate for what he lost. And this is what Neverland was all about. And this is why he wanted to be around children. And this is why he wanted to have a constant childhood. And, I mean, it's just unfathomable that somebody would go in under the premise that I'm here to help you and I'm here to make you look like the humanitarian you are, and to help you formulate an international children's holiday. And they talked about it. I have seen the outtake footage more than once. And, and instead of it really being about anything to do with that, it all became about Bashir's suspicion that in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder, what was Michael Jackson doing with this boy who had the cancer? Meanwhile, Bashir's the one who brought the boy with the cancer up to Neverland. Jackson hadn't seen the boy in years.
Did you ever see the other Bashir documentary? It was called Michael Jackson and His Boys. It was like 3 weeks prior to the trial. Corey Feldman was on it and a whole bunch of people.
Yes, I didn't know Bashir did it. I know that thing aired.
Yeah, Bashir did it. I'll send you the email, but I couldn't believe he had the audacity to even do that. I think, he wanted to get his career noticed, albeit negative, positive.
Absolutely. He was looking, as Paul Rodriguez told me, and I posted it on YouTube. There's an interview I did with Paul Rodriguez and Tom Mesereau, which is posted on YouTube. If anybody cares to plug in my name along with Tom Mesereau, you'll see it, in which I do that interview. And in the interview, Rodriguez says, I asked him, what do you think of Bashir? And his answer is, I think he's a gold digger just like all the rest of the Arvizos, basically. And he wanted to make $1 million off of it, and he probably did. And the truth
I have the thing here. I'm going to play that interview with Paul Rodriguez. Okay?
Great. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Welcome to Paul Rodriguez, the Jackson jury foreman. So you're the foreman, and as the foreman, you decided, I understand, to take kind of a straw poll of what everybody thought.
I think we were almost a split vote at that time, 6 against, 6 for.
But now this woman that we call the grandma, what did she do?
Okay, right about in there somewhere, she leaned over the table, started beating the table, and she says, by God, and 3 or 4 times, I mean really heavy, this man is guilty, and no one's going to change my mind about this. He is guilty as ever, and that's it. I've made my decision.
And she says this at the beginning, before there's ever deliberations?
Right, exactly.
I've never been in a deliberation room, and neither have most of the
You don't want
viewers.
to go there.
You don't want to go there. But I do want to go there. I want to take our viewers there. How often did you look at that in the jury room, and how important was that to you as the deliberations progressed?
Actually, that tape became very important. We felt that we had reached some kind of conclusion on most of the issues, the 14 counts against him. But that tape, for some reason, we just couldn't agree on. I don't know if we watched it 4, 5, 6 times, but we did watch it because the last time we watched it, we decided, okay, why are we watching this again? what are we looking for? And most of us felt the same way, that we were looking for his demeanor. How was his body? Was he, moving around a lot? Was he nervous? Was he anxious? And he didn't seem to come across that of anyone as someone that had been molested.
He told the police in his initial interview he believed it was 4 or 5 times that he was molested. Later on the witness stand, it became 1 or 2 times.
Right.
That's a huge problem.
We talked about that, and all of us felt the same way. We felt that this kid's lying. He really is lying about what's going on.
Through his teeth,
yeah.
Lying.
So anyway, the more we listened to all this, the more we felt that they don't have a case.
Let me ask you, though, in the Bashir outtake footage, because we've got some of that here, and it's never been seen before, what was your reaction to that? Because I felt I got to know Michael personally through those outtakes.
Right, that's probably the only time we really felt like we got to know a little bit more about Michael Jackson, and that's part of what we talked about in deliberations. We felt that Michael was still a kid in a man's body, and we felt that the Bashir tape, if he could air it the way he wanted to air it, he would make millions on it, which I'm sure he did. We felt that this guy is another gold digger. He's using Michael Jackson to lure him in, get him to say what he wants him to say, because that's what people will buy.
Everything that I do is inspired from the children, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, if it wasn't for the children, I'd throw in the towel.
I've been able to sleep at night, and so did have the other jurors, because we all felt we came to the right conclusion.
Thank you,
Right
Paul
decision.
Rodriguez.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yes, so that was Paul Rodriguez, and that sums it up pretty much.
It sure does. It really makes me sad when I hear it because, when I realize that there are still so many people out there who somehow want to believe or still insist that Michael Jackson, got away with something when in fact the truth is that whole trial was a vendetta, in my opinion, based on a DA who was out for Michael Jackson's blood, who wanted to run him out of Santa Barbara County, who wound up running Michael Jackson out of his home, his only haven, which was Neverland, turned Michael Jackson into a nomad who really felt he didn't belong anywhere, and, in my opinion, ultimately caused the early death of Michael Jackson because Michael, at some point, not only couldn't he sleep, but then he felt he had to prove himself to the world a different way, which is with his talent, and make this unbelievable comeback, and the pressure of all of that just all came crashing down on him and caused ultimately his demise. And I think had he had Neverland and the haven of Neverland and had been left to his own devices, yes, he had financial troubles, and yes, he would have had to make some change-ups in how he handled the Sony catalog, but I don't think that Michael would have been in the shape he was in toward the end of his life.
You mentioned the DA, Tom Sneddon. I'm going to play something. This is After the Verdict. We'll come back and we'll talk about it on the other side.
What this happened? To Michael Jackson.
Sneddon, do you have any second thoughts about the conspiracy charge? A lot of people felt it made the trial a little longer, a little more complicated, and was, as I just mentioned to Ron, a reach.
Well, we just don't agree with that. Our analysis was that there was substantial evidence to support that charge, and we still believe that. The fact that it extended the trial, that's the way we have trials for. I don't agree with that assessment, and we felt that we charged appropriately and still feel we charged appropriately.
You were strongly in favor of a gag order in this case, and what it seemed to mean was that on a daily basis, representatives of the Jackson family who were not under that gag order could go out and speak to the press and rebut what was happening in the courtroom, while members of the prosecution team could not. In hindsight, did that strategy backfire?
No, I don't think so. And I don't believe in trying cases in the media. We knew what the downside was to that situation. We knew that they could continue to leak things to the media and to other representatives. But I believe that, knowing the judge as I do, that there would have been a gag order in place no matter what had happened, whether we had asked for it or not, because he had some real concerns about the pretrial publicity. So no, I don't believe that anything different would have happened whether we didn't ask for it or not. There was going to be a protective order.
And Mr. Sneddon, you know that people have said that there was some sort of personal vendetta in this, you against Michael Jackson. You have strongly denied that. But once you started to hear the chatter about it, did you give any thought to removing yourself from the prosecution team in this case?
No, I didn't. There's no reason to, because it isn't true. I'm doing the job, and I have the institutional knowledge of the 93-94 investigation, which, as you know, if you follow the trial, became very important since a number of those witnesses were called. I was familiar with them. They had trust in me. And I did nothing wrong or inappropriate, and I was just doing my job. So, no, there was never any thought in my mind to remove myself. And frankly, it wouldn't have done any good, because they still would have said I'm behind the scenes orchestrating this whole thing. So that's just a smoke screen. That's all that is.
What did you think of that?
Well, I was there for that press conference. I actually witnessed it in person. And at the time, just after the trial, I went to his press conference, and I also went to the jurors' press conference. And by the way, the jurors were thrilled with their verdict at the time. Later, two of them changed their mind. It was funny how they had that changed mind while they were sitting telling the media that they did the right thing. And Tom Sneddon, yeah, he made the admission right there. He said it. He had the information from the Jordy Chandler thing in 92 and 93 to feel that he was justified in continuing to go after Michael Jackson. That, to me, is actually him inadvertently admitting to his having having it out for Jackson from the time that he couldn't get a trial going on the Jordy Chandler issue.
Right, in a roundabout way, he definitely he made some admissions in that little spot there.
Yeah,
but
he did.
Okay, yeah, he definitely was after Michael one way or another.
He went out of the country, Jordan. He went to Australia. He went to other countries looking for people who would be willing to go up against Michael Jackson. This man spent his career going after Michael Jackson. He had a law change in the state of California allowing previous conduct or allegations to be brought into a trial if they were of the same nature. That was not a law on the books in California. Tom Sneddon got that law enacted so that he could bring in all this prior allegations in a trial against Michael Jackson. And that is exactly what he did in 2005 at Santa Maria. It was a witch hunt.
Oh, totally. Okay, we still have your book to talk about. A little bit about the revise. Would you mind if we take a 5-minute Michael Jackson song break and come back?
Absolutely not. But when we come back, we can only talk about 10 minutes, so I'm late for me.
Okay, so after this song, The Way You Make Me Feel, we'll come back, we'll talk about the book and Dr. Murray, and then we'll wrap it up, okay?
Okay, thank you, Jordan.
The king of pop, there's nobody like him, Michael Jackson. He is one of the best.
He is the best. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, Michael Jackson Conspiracy, the book where Aphrodite Jones will tell you why Gavin Arvizio, how she was at the courtroom and she saw the videos and all in depth. And now you have a revised edition. Am I saying that right?
Yes, I have an updated version of Michael Jackson Conspiracy, which I released earlier, late last year, and it's available now on also as an ebook, and it's available in Canada, Australia, and England for the first time as well. And the price is reduced, and it's in paperback. And I did do an update about the Conrad Murray trial and Michael's death and aftermath of his death. And
so Conrad Murray's in the book?
Conrad Murray, I discuss at some short length. It's really a brief update, because after having covered the Murray trial and blogged about it for months, that it was ongoing in 2011, I came to the conclusion that nothing I could say would really make it any clearer than what was decided in the courtroom, which is that Conrad Murray is guilty of having killed Michael Jackson, of having fed Michael Jackson a lethal combination of drugs and propofol.
And not even having the brains to have the right equipment, a simple EKG machine. I mean, my God, I don't even know things like that, and I know that you have to have an EKG machine.
Well,
That's
and
so
you need
stupid.
to have a monitor as well on the patient, which if you're not going to have a physical monitor on the patient, which was not there, you also need to be physically in the presence of the patient when you have them anesthetized, and yet here this doctor actually left the room for lengths of time. I believe it was something like 47 minutes that he was out of the room, and we know that from the phone records.
He gave so many different stories. He said he was watching him.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to do a show just related to Conrad Murray?
I intend to do something about Conrad Murray, and for my show, True Crime, or it may be a special, something that I do for the network, Investigation Discovery. It's not something that I'm going to just let go of. However, I did have the opportunity to get my hands on Michael Jackson's medical records from Arnold Klein's office, in which he goes under the name Omar Arnold, and I have to say that I don't know whether or not I would want my medical records released to the world. And I think that Michael Jackson, even though he used the alias, we know it's him because it was verified through the nurses in that office and et cetera. I don't feel it's fair to bring out all of those medical records in order to talk about the various things leading up to Michael's demise and physical demise. So I have struggled with how I'm going to handle that, because it's not only Conrad Murray. He was the last doctor and the physical doctor who caused Michael's death, but there were other doctors who played a role in leading up to that. One in particular who I don't think I need to name, I think everyone knows who it is, who enabled Michael, if you will, to become addicted to Demerol and other drugs, and who, in essence, created the platform under which Michael finally collapsed and couldn't sleep. And one of the withdrawal symptoms from not having Demerol is a lack of is insomnia. And so many things converged to lead to Michael's death and early demise, and including, of course, those conspiracy theories out there about Conrad Murray having been hired by Sony. And I don't think that's true.
I don't buy that personally.
No, I don't either. But there are people who really believe wholeheartedly that somehow or another there was a dastardly attempt to hire someone who would kill Michael, and I think that takes it too far. So I do struggle with how I'm going to handle it, since I don't want to reveal Michael's medical records, and since,
there's ways to go about it without actually getting to the records itself.
Yes, there are ways to go about it. However, I have so much information that it's hard for me to ignore some of the blatant things, and at the same time, there's so much potential for litigation that I hesitate to really delve into it. It's a tricky subject matter to handle, apart from what we know already in trial. And many of the documents that I have, including Michael's records, were sealed documents, and they remain sealed. And even though I was able to obtain copies of these things, they are technically sealed by the court, and that becomes a whole nother can of worms for me legally. And so I have yet to deal with how I'm going to approach the Conrad Murray situation and the death of Michael and the killing of Michael, and what led up to it. So I struggle with it. I think of it daily, and there's never a day that goes by that I don't hear a Michael Jackson song, think of Michael, and hope that he is at peace and smiling down on his children, who now seem to be doing very well and are proof positive that he was a good father and that he is a good soul and that he is all the good things that his fans know him to be.
Tell me about his fans. I know since I started covering MJ in '05, they're just so beautiful, I guess the word is. Do you find that with the MJ fans?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, his fans are the salt of the earth. People try to portray Michael's fans as being lunatics and crazies and obsessive and fanatic, and I don't think that's true. I think that Michael Jackson has a fan base that, like no other, unlike any other person ever living will have again. And all they want is for the world's eyes to be opened up as to the truth of Michael's life and as to his legacy. There's still that fight that constantly goes on for his fans to try to convert people who have made up their minds about Michael and the sordid allegations against him being true. And actually, my book is one of the weapons I think that fans use to show, because in that book I prove what went down in that courtroom and show how Tom Mesereau won that case and why the jury voted not guilty. And it wasn't because there was star power, and it wasn't because people didn't understand. No, they understood all too well that Michael Jackson was innocent and not guilty.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like with the Michael Jackson, you find fans that they're either totally in with him or they're totally against him. You never find like Michael a little bit. You know what I mean?
It's very black and white. And there are no shades of gray when it comes to Michael Jackson. People seem to either be very much in his corner or they're closed-minded, and that's it. They've made up their mind, as the jury foreman said about one juror. She had made up her mind before she even looked at one piece of evidence. So I don't know if time will finally bear this out and the truth will finally be revealed, and once and for all people will understand that Jackson was tried for something that he never did. I can't answer that, but I certainly will continue to fight for it.
And do you think because I've heard some sneak peeks, if Gavin ever whispered to somebody that he was molested, who was not molested, excuse me, do you think he would get in some kind of trouble if he had ever said something like that? I mean, I've heard rumors of that, but if he told somebody that, could he be liable?
You mean, I'm not sure I understand the question. He did say that. He said that in court.
No. If Gavin came clean now and said this never happened for whatever reason.
Oh, I see. He said he wasn't molested. Oh,
right,
yeah.
Right. If he spoke openly to maybe one of his friends, and then somehow that linked to the National Enquirer or whatever, what would happen to Gavin?
I don't think anything would happen to Gavin, because I don't know that that he would have to be willing to make that statement personally and on the record in order for him to be prosecuted for having
Right.
created a false trial. And if we hear it secondhand through hearsay that it's something that he allegedly said, there's no way to prosecute that. So I doubt highly that he would ever come forward publicly and set the record straight, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't like that. Can you give us a preview for Monday's show?
Yes,
True Crime?
absolutely. True Crime on this coming Monday at 10 p.m. is going to be about a police officer in Green Bay, Wisconsin, who is accused of killing his wife and burning her in their house. And it's a very interesting scenario because his sons are convinced that he's been framed and that the mom was a drinker and was addicted to prescription medications, and she was a smoker, and she died drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes on the couch in the living room.
Oh, my.
However, there is another side to that story. So it is an interesting case that I had to grapple with for this coming episode of True Crime. And then the following week, the finale is about 5 young men in Dixmoor, Illinois, which is a suburb of South Chicago, who were wrongfully convicted of having raped and murdered a 12-year-old child.
Oh,
and
my.
the reason, it's a horrendous thing, but they were
sounds
exonerated.
like the West Memphis 3.
Exactly.
Similar.
Very similar. And they were exonerated recently, and I was able to interview some of them after they had been exonerated. But the reason they were convicted is just like the West Memphis 3. They gave false confessions, and people can't understand why a 15 or 16-year-old would confess to something they never did. But if you're 15 or 16 years old and you're being badgered by police for hours, and the police are telling you that, well, if you just sign this piece of paper saying that you were there at the time of the crime and you know who did it and you were part of it, we'll let you go home. And the kids do that and then implicate other kids as well in so doing, and the trial occurs and the jury sees false confessions and believes that these kids are all guilty. It's a horrific situation that happened in West Memphis and also happened in Dixmoor, Illinois, and it's fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time to see them now, having lost 15 years of their lives in prison, to come out as young men not knowing what to do with themselves now. And one of the things I hope is that people will watch the show and get on the internet and try to contact these young men to help them get jobs and get careers and get their lives back on track, because they've lost.
Do you have special gratitude to some people like Michael, or people who have been wrongfully convicted and things like that? Do you have a special place in your heart for that?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And, I mean, that's why I'm ending the whole series this season with an episode about 5 young teens who were wrongfully convicted and, looking at a way to help heal them now that their day has come and they've been exonerated, but they're still being looked at as being guilty and being ex-convicts and felons in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of society. And they need to have an opportunity to have their life back. And it's a very, it's imperative that we write it for people who were falsely convicted, and that we find a way to allow them to reenter society. And we haven't done that yet with a lot of them.
Well, I'll tell you, Aphrodite, if there were more people on this earth like you, we'd definitely have a better place.
Well, you compliment me too much, but I do appreciate it.
No, I mean, all these things. People, they say, who like Michael Jackson are very sensitive people.
Absolutely.
And, I think that to be true. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jordan. I always appreciate talking with you, and you're just a pleasure to speak to, and very articulate and very informed, and
thank you.
I enjoy it very much.
Okay, so we'll see your shows the next 2 Mondays, and the book is not available in the U.S.?
Yeah, no, it is. It's available in the United States. Absolutely. It's out there in paperback, and it's available to be bought through Amazon or my website, which is AphroditeJones.com.
Can they go through your website, and there's links?
There's links on my website, and they can just look for it in Amazon, and definitely get a hold of the updated version of Michael Jackson Conspiracy.
Aphrodite, thanks a million for joining us. We'll speak to you in a few months, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Okay, Aphrodite. Have a good one.
You too.